Today on Engine Power, Mike and Pat are honored to refresh this 30-year-old blown big block Ford straight out of the most notorious truck in the world, the iconic original BigFoot.
This year marks the 40th anniversary of the original monster truck. There can be only one, BigFoot.
And it's unheard of that the iconic machine would ever pull into your driveway in need of a little help. That's right, the truck that started it all, BigFoot 1, is being dropped off by none other than the great Bob Chandler and business partner and longtime driver, Jim KRAMER.
That thing looks awesome.
I want to see what those big tires on there.
She doesn't race anymore, but our team is going to get the chance to freshen her up, clean up the chassis, and do some much-needed maintenance. And more importantly for us, we get to rebuild this massive, blown, big block Ford that was state-of-the-art back in the day.
First things first, get rid of these skinny tires.
All right, Bob, we have BigFoot 1 here, the original truck. It's retired from racing, but still does all the parades and that. But the rumor is this was your original truck back in '74, personal vehicle.
Yes, I ordered it from a dealership. Of course, back then they didn't have four-wheel drive vehicles, so it took 6-7 months to get it. And my wife and I used to take it, we'd go camping with it, put a camper on the back of it and take it down the river. But it went from the dealership to my house and the tires got changed immediately. That was the first thing that got changed. But it ended up being a vicious cycle because I put big tires on it and they weren't big enough for me, so I put bigger tires on it. Then I started breaking axles, so you put bigger axles in it. And then you run out of power, so you got to put a bigger engine. That's when I went to a 460 in it. It went that way for probably 3 or 4 years where I just kept changing it.
4 decades later, BigFoot is still a worldwide phenomenon, running 6 race trucks at a time, 3 more just for display, and even an all-electric BigFoot, but there will never be another original.
A truck of this stature, you know, deserves a lot of credit. Something like the Smithsonian, is that something that could be in the future?
I would welcome it. We're still using it right now. Yeah, we hope it'd be great to do.
I think it would be the highest honor. I really do, because it, in fact, started the whole industry of monster trucks, which has become a great form of racing and family entertainment. And this is the truck right here. That there was no other trucks, period, before this truck came along, and this man developed it. I mean, it started the whole industry. It deserves to be in the Smithsonian.
Well, now that we've seen the truck, for us as engine guys, we want to see the important thing. Let's take a peek at the engine, see what we have.
Okay.
Let's get a lot of hands on this big boy.
This is a piece of machinery right here.
Look at this thing.
Right there in the light, huh? Yeah.
Well, there she is, the original, huh?
Tell us a little history. This is automotive archaeology for us, because this thing's been around a while.
It actually started out life as a boat motor, supposed to be, and converted it to where we could use it. 640 inches. I forget the horsepower on it now, but had the NOS on it and everything.
How long has it been since it's ran?
Probably
Close to 20 years.
20 years.
20 years.
Really? Mm-hmm. Good running engine when it was pulled?
Yes, it was. I think you're going to enjoy this, because when you dive into this thing, it's like diving in the past.
Yeah.
You're going to see how engine builders did it many years ago. I mean, you guys are up to everything right now. You know all the new technologies and the metallurgy and everything else. Well, these guys had what they had.
Great. So it'll be interesting to see what's in there. I'm very excited to get inside.
And we got one of the best in the business.
And I want to say this too. I think, Bob, you kind of say this. If you got a good idea, something make it a little bit better, you know, we're not opposed to making a change here and there. We're really not.
We'll be very kind to it. Like Mike said, we'll treat it like it's our own, and we're just very flattered and honored to be part of, getting able to work on something like this. So.
Okay, you've been talking about this, so why don't we just quit talking and go to work?
Have at it.
You're the boss.
We need to roll it to our shop. Say goodbye.
So long.
Next, we crack open this engine builder's time capsule.
In case you missed it, the original BigFoot engine is here and ready for a complete refresh before it and the original BigFoot truck go on display for good. Lucky for us, they trusted the PowerNation crew to freshen up and update this awesome piece of history. Pat and I get the engine, the original Allen Root 640 cubic inch big block Ford. Being able to participate in this piece of automotive history is way more than an honor. It was a dream just as a young child to make it to the local stadium to see those big blue trucks soaring through the air and crushing whatever got in their way. Now to be a part of the refresh of the original one that started it all makes that dream a lot larger than life. Now before we get started, Jim and Bob need a few more moments with the power plant that set the performance standard on 66-inch tires.
It was actually designed for a boat. I've never seen an engine like this. When this thing rolled in, I go, oh my God, what the hell is this? You know, I haven't ever seen an engine like this. Right. All aluminum block, aluminum heads. Look at the manifold, tall deck. You don't see stuff like this around the Midwest. We just didn't have that. The guys we ran with didn't have that either. They had big block Chevys or small block Chevys or Fords. Mm-hmm. That was it. Nobody had a specialized engine at the time. Nobody did.
Putting it back in the truck, it's going to be a kick for me. Just to see it in there, number one, but just to be able to drive it around is going to be spectacular. I know we've had people come in the shop that wanted to buy it, and if it was up to me, it's not going to be sold. At times we need money where we might have thought about it, but you know, that's BigFoot. That's BigFoot 1 right there. That's where it's got to go back in BigFoot 1. That's the only place it can go, as far as I'm concerned.
This is a rare opportunity to step back in time and see what was state-of-the-art in performance technology back in the mid-1980s. It's automotive archaeology at its finest. Plus, this combination has some unique parts specific to the application, like the Predator CARBS, the BDS blower, the MSD magneto, and an external oil pump, and we'll cover those as it comes apart. Before monster trucks swapped over to injected engines, they all ran Predators. They're known to be the best off-road carburetor and have great characteristics like throttle response, excellent low-end torque, and a unique look that says performance. The only problem that arose with them was from inexperienced tuners. These things haven't seen the light of day in 20 years. We're going to be as careful with disassembly as we are with reassembly of this engine. We all know it has serious historic value, and we want to preserve every bit of that. Ooh, that is not your typical 4-barrel right there.
I've never seen the inside of one.
See, these plates, they don't particularly move. It's a variable Venturi type deal, which it just goes on air demand. Mm-hmm. It's a unique setup. There's not a lot of stuff that flops around in there, not a lot of moving parts in it. So.
Very cool.
To keep track of where everything goes, we're taking photos so we know what the untouched piece looked like.
All right, got all the linkage.
Very good, that's very important. This will ensure us the orientation of the plumbing, and the exterior of the engine will go back the same way. We're also bagging all the parts and pieces for each component. This keeps the hardware from getting mixed up and costing us time later trying to figure out where things go. 1, 2, 3 here. These Predators are extremely important to Bob, us too. They look great on the outside, and all the linkage functions perfect, but we will give the internals a refresh.
Thing's a little dry, isn't it?
Yep. Sure is.
A little brittle.
20-year-old dust in there too.
Yeah. What's cool, they got the catch screen for any parts that come off up top, can't get into the blower rotors. Mm-hmm. The carb base is a 2-piece design. We have to remove the upper carb plate first to gain access to the fasteners that secure the base to the blower. Now the custom NOS nitrous assembly can be removed. We're not sure what the horsepower level was originally. Now this engine will make gobs of power blown. Amazingly, they never needed to use it.
With the blower belt removed, we'll feel how well the blower turns over. It feels good, but there are a couple spots on the rotor that concern us, and it's an obvious sign of repair. The blower studs are aluminum and made to break away during an engine failure. If that happens, the restraint plate straps keep the blower from leaving the engine bay. BDS has been in the supercharger business for decades. This is one of their 871 units, which is standard on a monster truck, and we'll be sending this one back to them for a complete refresh.
The history lesson continues coming up.
We're back and ready to dig deeper into our automotive artifact. Now this is the original Allen Root 640 cubic inch big block Ford that set the monster truck world on fire back in the 80s. Now we've got it down to long block form, but it's not going to stay this way for long.
The tall deck cast aluminum manifold was built for performance, with nitrous bungs for a wet kit and a blow-off plate in case of a lean backfire. This thing was ready for serious power. Now we're starting to see the effects of it sitting for 20+ years. The cylinder head was ground for pushrod clearance, then epoxy was added to ensure water would not leak into the engine from the thin spots. It's obviously showing its age by separating from the aluminum. Aside from that, everything else looks pretty good up here. Now we can remove the dry rotted plug wires and the NGK spark plugs. Finally, the MSD magneto can be removed.
A magneto is a combination of a distributor and generator built into one. Unlike a regular distributor, a magneto creates its own spark energy without external voltage. They're used in engines that require high spark energy and can produce up to 20,000 volts. This engine came to us with the unique Allen root valve covers that were specifically made to fit his cylinder heads. Now the Hemi style is an eye catcher and we're leaving them untouched. It's their time to be removed and we can't wait to see what's underneath them.
Oh man, that's cool.
Wonderful.
Gasket came off in one piece. This is a gasket you cannot buy down in an auto parts store. It's unique to the Allen root setup. This is a Ford part number, but it's all Allen root and it's very unique, but it all looks good.
The valve train is specific to his design as well. Let's start with the intake side. It's a shaft-mounted rocker that rides on a needle-bearing fulcrum and has a large diameter roller tip to handle the high valve spring pressures. Now that large diameter roller also helps distribute the load due to the large amount of sweep on the lash cap because of that big cam.
What that means is there are more needle bearings riding on the roller tip's axle to distribute load. That equates to less friction and greater durability. The roller tip has a significant amount of movement on top of the lash cap, and it's under as much as 1,000 pounds of spring pressure. Keeping that big wheel rolling also keeps the valve guides from wearing out by not pulling on the valve and bending the stem inside the guide.
The stands are billet aluminum and made to a custom height which sets the valve train geometry for this ratio, which is 1.72 to 1. The rockers are also offset to allow port placement in the cylinder head. The exhaust side uses the same type of shaft mount, but they have a slipper foot on the valve tip because there wasn't enough material down here to put a roller and retain the strength. Now the reason they're so long, it's the only way to get proper push rod angle because of where the valve is placed in the combustion chamber. We're going to mark every piece of the valve train so it goes back where it belongs during reassembly. To do this, we'll use our Dremel, which is much more gentle on the parts than hitting them with a stamp and hammer.
Ooh, jeez. That is not supposed to have a 1/2 inch of lash and any discoloration, so we're gonna have to investigate that further.
Come on with it.
We're gonna remove the rocker arms in pairs at each individual cylinder when they have no spring pressure. This applies to every engine. They come apart in a fairly unique way. By removing the Allen bolt, the shaft slides out of the assembly and the rocker arm can be taken off. Now that the stand bolt is accessible, we can remove it from the head.
I just bent the Allen.
Or so we thought. It seems 20-year-old Loctite is a force to be reckoned with.
Drowning it out.
I'm gonna mess something up right there. So the arms and the rods are priority. Again, keeping them organized. We also found the culprit of all that excessive valve lash. The number 8 intake valve is hung open, indicating it's seized in the guide.
With the long breaker bar, we can remove the massive 9/16" head stud nuts in the reverse order they were originally torqued to. With only 10 in the head, they have to be large to keep the head clamped down to the block under high cylinder pressure situations. Yeah, buddy, there it went. I heard it. With a few swats of the rubber dead blow, the 20-year-old seal has been broken, and the driver's side head can be removed.
And it looks good. There's no signs of burns, leakage. It was doing its job.
And it looks like the passenger side did its job too. Not bad for a 29-year-old automotive artifact. We're back and continuing with the original Bigfoot's power plant. Now, just like us, you're discovering racing technology from over 20 years ago. Now, a lot of parts on this engine are obsolete and just flat out unable to get. So we'll be calling on some of the top guys in the industry who would have had their hands on engines like this back in the day to help us revive this piece of history.
This Mylodon crank-driven water pump is one of those long-lost parts. It's a cast aluminum piece that was found on performance engines in cars and boats. Now the pump can be pulled off the coupler and it can be removed. Next, the crank bolt is taken out to remove the coupler drive. These countersunk bolts retaining the blower pulley are being stubborn and won't come out. So a little backyard ingenuity is in the works. That's a proper term for a torch, WD-40, and an impact. Directly heating the head of the countersunk bolt will help loosen the Loctite. Due to the heat, The WD-40 is drawn into the void for extra lubrication under the head of the bolt, and the shock of the impact is doing its job to remove them.
Whee!
Success!
Wow, that was a little nerve-wracking.
Using our Matco balancer remover, we can pull off the timing wheel, remove the supply line to the oil pump, and the original Aviade pump comes off, followed by the magneto drive housing. Now the Dually Enterprises oil pan comes off to expose the cylinder case. And at first glance, we're really impressed.
Back up front, the blower belt tensioner and bracket can go, followed by the timing cover specific to this engine design.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Which reveals this highly specialized gear drive. Now, timing gears are very accurate because there is no chain to stretch. For reference during reassembly, we're turning the engine to TDC and documenting exactly where the alignment marks are. Now the entire gear drive can be removed. The camshaft is the next item to be disturbed. It's a solid roller from Howard's. Now it'll be upgraded to a more modern lobe design to give us more power and torque where it's needed in the power band. The rotating assembly is the foundation everything is built upon. We were lucky enough to get handed a folder containing the original build sheet, giving us the specs and manufacturers of all the parts in this engine.
The rods were built by Crowers, so we know they're strong. They're a forged and machined I-beam design. The Big Block Chrysler rod bearing, which is smaller than the stock Big Block Ford, translates to more strength at the big end and less bearing speed, which reduces friction. The pistons are custom Aries flat tops with 2 small valve reliefs. These gave this engine a 7.59 to 1 compression ratio with an 84cc combustion chamber in the heads. The ring pack is an 043 top, 16th second, and 3/16 oil ring. If you're new to the engine building scene, instead of spiral locks or round wire locks, these wrist pins are held in place by a free-floating aluminum button. This is not common practice anymore and will be replaced. The custom-forged 4750 stroke crank is held in place by extra beefy splayed 4-bolt main caps, plus a bolt hole in the center for this. An easy and safe way to remove them with a slide hammer. They're made of aluminum and hard anodized. They not only keep the crank in place, they add structural rigidity to the bottom of the block. Here's an oops we discovered. Too long of flywheel bolts were installed at some point and they self-clearanced on the back of this cap and block. The fix after these bolts were removed required helicoils to the crank.
The crankshaft is a unique piece from Arnold Forgings and has a cool story behind it. Larry Arnold designed the dies and had the forgings all done in Japan. The forging weighed 156 pounds raw and could make a big block Chevy, big block Ford, and a Hemi crank between a 3.6 and a 4.750 stroke. The quality of this forging was so far superior that their competition faded away from Pro Stock and Top Fuel, making this the backbone of the most powerful engines in its day.
So, do we have any question what we're doing with this engine? Nope. Jim's orders made it pretty clear.
I really want to see it run really bad. You know, I want to see it get back in the truck. I know Bob Chandler would love to have this thing in the truck. And I'd like to see that happen for him, to get this thing going and get in the truck and make the truck complete like it was, like it should be again. And this is the piece right here that's going to make that happen.
In the weeks to come, that's what we'll do. See you then.